Hi everybody, I'm Tim from troutandfeather.com, and in this fly tying tutorial we're going to be tying a variation of Jack Gartside's Gurgler. Stay tuned. Let's take a sneak peek of the finished Gurgler pattern. You'll notice that many of these materials are lightweight, such as the marabou tail, foam on top, the Willie sparkle material for the body. And that's great because we can get away with a lighter rod when we're casting this. For now, let's get a clean hook in the vise and start tying this pattern. Let's start tying this variation of the Gurgler. In my Stonfo Transformer vise, I have a Honic competition hook. It's their H970 BL. The BL designation stands for barbless. I'll be tying this today in a size 10, though I definitely will tie it a lot larger, and I'll probably go as small as somewhere around a size 12. For our thread, we're going to be using some 6/0 chartreuse uni thread. I'm just going to start by placing this directly behind the eye, securing just a little bit of a base, and go back until I hit the point where there would be a barb. At about that point, we're going to tie in our tailing fiber. Now our first fiber that we're going to be using is basically just a grizzly yellow marabou. So this is just a piece of marabou, but you can see it has a yellow and grizzly barred look to it. I really love this style of marabou. It just gives a nice amount of movement to it. In the size 10 and 12, I typically will only use one plume. As I tie this in larger sizes, I'll use more than one. For the length, I basically want to measure from the bend to the eye. When I have that approximately there, I'm just going to lock this in place. And then it's okay if we allow this to build up the body a little bit. It's just a hair too long, so I'm just going to trim it away. Get some of these excess fibers out of there. Just some loose wraps forward. And then some little bit tighter locking wraps back. Now remember, if this marabou just starts to get a little crazy for you, just put a little saliva on your fingers. You can kind of just place it where you want it to go. Now take a look at whatever your tailing fiber is going to be and decide if you want a lot of bulk or minimal bulk. With this marabou, when it gets wet, it's really minimal bulk, but it has some really great movement in the water. The next material we're going to be using is some crystal flash. So I'm just going to grab around 6 strands. I'm going to try to leave it a little bit lengthier. If you don't get exactly 6, that's okay. Whenever I tie these in, I'm basically going to do kind of a 2-step process. This is the side that I cut, so I know they're all about the same length. And I want them to go around the same length as the tail, maybe just a little bit longer. I'm not going to worry about dividing them up yet. Just lock them in place. And then I only have 2 wraps in there, so I can kind of move them around where I want them. I just kind of want them, a couple of them going on one side, a couple of them going on the other side of the marabou. I'm just going to lock back. And that's really it to secure that crystal flash. But with these remaining ones, I'm just going to hold them straight up and place them back in my material clip. We're going to be returning to those ones a little bit later. All right, next, let's get those kind of locked down and out of the way. We're going to get to kind of the superstar of this fly, and that's just a little bit of some closed cell foam. What's really nice about this foam is that it's going to really help this Gurgler float. Now if you notice, I trimmed it so it's just about a little bit wider than the gap of the hook. That's kind of the thickness of this that I'd like, I guess the width of it. Then I've also trimmed just a little bit more of a carrot shape near the base, just to whenever I tie it in, not to add a lot of excess. Now if you don't want to have any of that in, you could absolutely trim it further up. I'm going to trim it just a little bit higher than I originally showed you. It doesn't matter to me if it's an even bulk or not. I really just care about getting this secured in place. And that's what having all this extra foam really does. I'm not looking at this underbody as more of a buoyancy material. It's more just a way for me to secure it to the hook shank so I know it's not going to come free. The nice thing about using some 6/0 or a larger diameter thread is that you can really bear down on it and get everything just tight to this shank. Okay, now when I get back to my starting point, now we're going to go with the body material. And this is a material that I've used on a few of my videos over the years. This is a type of crystal chenille. It's made from Willie's flies. I'll put a link to it in the description. But what's nice is it's a very lightweight material, and it's got really just a decent amount of flash to it, and they're lengthier clumps. So kind of keep that in mind depending on the style of the body you want. You may want them so they're not that really frizzed out. I like just all that extra stuff because when it gets wet, it's going to be going all over the place. So I'll just lock in an end of this. Keep it really tight. Just wrap forward a little bit. And then next, I'm going to wind this crystal flash, or this type of crystal flash chenille, I guess. And whenever I'm winding it forward, in this case, it doesn't matter if they're exactly touching. If a little bit of that yellow is peeking through, that's not a problem for me. But I do want to make sure a lot of these fibers are going back. So I'm just going to help to assist and pull those back as I bring these wraps forward. I'm going to double it over itself here just to kind of help out with that bulk near the eye. I think we can get one more in there. And that's it. Next, we're going to take our foam and we're going to bring it over all this stuff. But before I do that, I want to just make sure I have all these fibers just kind of going down. And then I'm also going to pull some of them back just so I keep them away from the eye of my fly. Once I've done that, let's see if we can keep these down as nice as possible. I want to pull it tight. And I'm going to take my left hand and just pinch it around the hook and then give it a few really nice wraps. So I got about 6 wraps in there. I'm going to take this front end. I'm not going to really finish it yet, but I just want to help it just so it stays back and really creates that nice popping action. Now that it looks like it's really going to do that for me, I'm just going to push it back down, and now we're going to return to all these crystal flash fibers that we had saved in our material clip. I'm going to pull them back over the shell. I want them as even as possible, basically centered. Once I have them centered, I'm just going to lock them in place. Here's one wrap, and there's 2. Now, I'm not going to say that's a really important part of the pattern here to have those over the top, but why I like to keep these here is I'm going to now separate them into 2 clusters. Try to get around 3 in each cluster and just pull them to the side. So I have 2 or 3 going one way and 2 or 3 going the other direction. Just going to pull down on them. Then I just basically have to get one wrap over my side. Then I'll get one wrap over the side facing the camera. And that will really be enough to kind of keep them in that direction. Now that I have them kind of going out, I can play with them a little bit more. I can trim them to length if I want to. But I just really care about having them locked in place. I know they definitely are now. So I'm going to just pull all this foam back, return my thread to the front, and go immediately into my whip finish. I do 3 turns to start. Then I might grab a little bit of Sally Hansen Hard as Nails. Place that on the thread. Then let's get another 4 turns or so in there, just to make sure that head is locked in place. Now that I know it is, let's get away, just kind of trim away our thread. We have these crazy legs to trim away and our foam at the front. So for the foam at the front, I'm just going to go up a little ways. I like to just keep it nice and flat. Now there are others that will round it. There are some that will even trim it a little bit more, just so whenever you're casting, this doesn't kink and twist your tippet. So kind of keep that in mind, that this may be the part that's really just kinking your tippet. Though I like more of a significant head at times, really just to help push that water as I strip it. And then now we're going to trim the legs. I want them to just be a hair longer than all those fibers underneath. And that's the look right there. I might do some final trimming on all these before I finish this fly, but for the most part, this is the gurgler that I tie. I'll give you a 360 of it. And then let's change the camera angle a little bit, and we'll talk a lot more about how to kind of vary this fly and also how to fish it. Talk about an easy fly to tie and a really effective one to fish. Jack Gartside just created a winner in his Gurgler. But now let's break it down both from a fly tying and fly fishing perspective. We'll start with the former, and there are so many ways that you can vary this pattern from the original. In fact, the original had a foam body, whereas mine doesn't, which means it's going to sit a little bit lower than Jack Gartside's original. There are so many other things you can do. For instance, if you fish with saltwater, you're probably going to have a stainless hook. For that tail, you may not go with marabou. You may choose the original, like a bucktail. You could go with a zonker strip. You can go with a synthetic. I always tend to use that closed cell foam over the top, but for the body material, the sky is again the limit. I love crystal chenille, but you can also use just a regular hackle or some other type of synthetic. Color combos can really be out there. The two that have been most productive for me over the years have been anything with chartreuse and all black. Though basically, think about all those different combos that you have. Really, the only thing you're limited by is your own imagination. Just be creative and have fun with this one. Now, when we're fishing it, we're really going to base that on the species we're chasing. I tend to keep it around that size that I tied in the video, no matter if I'm fishing for bass, panfish, or even trout. If I'm going to fish with it we'll start with trout, because I bet you didn't expect to hear that. I tend to fish this as a dry dropper, which means it's going to be floating on top. I'll have a little piece of 5X attached to it, and I'll have a beadhead nymph hanging off of it. That way, as it floats down the river or stream, I'm going to have it on the surface, indicating if anything is going on and eating that beadhead underneath. And you will get strikes on the Gurgler on top. I'm not sure if they're taking it as a grasshopper, as a beetle, or just a food item, but trout will definitely eat it. But now I bet you probably think of it more as either saltwater or something for bass or panfish. And that's kind of what I think of as well. So whenever I fish this pattern, it's one that I'll cast out there on a floating line, get it close to the edge or some type of structure, and let it sit for like 10 or 15 or even 20 seconds, and then give it a nice long strip, and then let it sit again and see what happens. I really try to elicit a strike from that largemouth bass if I can. There are other situations in which I'll cast it out real close to shore, and as soon as it hits the edge of the water, I'll give it a strip and then wait. I rarely will just go strip, 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 unless maybe there's a striper blitz or something like that going on. Instead, I like to make a cast, give a strip, wait, give it another strip, and see what's going to happen. Fish are not always going to take this aggressively. I've had some really nice largemouth bass just suck it in, and you set the hook expecting a bluegill, and then all of a sudden you have a real fight on your hands. But have fun with this one. And there's one other method that I'd recommend you looking into, and that's if you're on a lake and you have a sinking fly line. And then you tie about a 3 or 4 foot leader to the end of that, and you fish this Gurgler right off that 3 or 4 foot leader. Think about what's going to happen. You have a fly line that's running right on the bottom of the water, and then you have this buoyant fly just coming off the warm water's bottom. What's going to happen? Those fish are going to be sitting right there, and they're going to be looking for this just kind of rising as you're stripping it along real slowly. Have fun with it, and I guarantee you're going to catch a lot of fish on this Gurgler if you haven't already. Well, thank you so much for watching this fly tying video. If you'd like to watch more like this, you can check out my website, which is troutandfeather.com. I also have a Facebook page and an Instagram account. They're both under that Trout and Feather heading. If you have any questions or comments, you can email me at tcammisa@gmail.com, or you can leave a comment down below in that comment section. I'd love to hear from you about some possible color combinations, some ways that you fished this pattern before, or all the fish that you've caught on it, because I guarantee a lot of you have used this pattern and you have some stories to tell. I can't wait to hear them. Once again, thank you so much for watching this fly tying tutorial, and I'll see all of you next time.
I